And then stage four is the longer term. So it's if we think about the company first of all, they've dealt with the immediate loss of Andy. They've put in some medium term steps to stabilize things, but now they've recognized and they want to create a better culture where fewer people or no people are at risk of burning out.
Mm-hmm.
What are some good practices that you see in some successful companies that have got that nailed, where the culture is correct and people are not burning out?
Yeah. Well, there's no such thing as a correct culture. It's different for every business, and it largely comes from the personalities of the founders, and then it gets to a point where that doesn't work anymore, so it becomes more linked to the team itself, and then to a new CEO that's brought in, etc., etc. So, and it evolves constantly over time. But I think the immediate change you would need to make if someone like a C-level CTO person had to drop out would be to look at the amount of demands there were on that person and on that role. Being realistic about how much an individual could take on in terms of, energy demands and uh, personal demands and project demands and so on and so forth. So that's not always an easy thing to do, especially in a startup, because it's ever changing, right? It's a constant state of flux. But at the very least, by looking at how much was on that person, you can say, okay, how valuable was all this stuff?
Yeah.
Was it worthwhile burning this person out over project X or process Y or whatever it is? So I think for C-level people, you have to kind of look at it at that kind of stage. I think if it's somebody within your team, then it's much more about how open they were to talk about how they were feeling about stuff. If you find out so late, or you're not able to make changes so late that they have actually left the company because they've burnt out, then you have to look at why it wasn't picked up. You have to look at why they weren't able to talk to people about needing to walk away, or what had happened incident wise that might have led them down this path towards burnout. But yeah, it's less holistic than if it were a C-level person. But it's the
But
same.
I am hearing from you some fairly basic things like prioritization and understanding the true impact of work, and therefore not doing wasted work, and cutting down work in progress almost.
That's a big part of it, and these are typical areas where startups struggle anyway, right? But I think that there's that, but there's also the psychosocial and the behavioural and the relationship part of it as well. So a lot of burnout comes from not having the right work relationships, or having bosses who are shouting at you when things don't get done, or are
Mm.
talking over you constantly in one-to-ones, or etc., etc. So yeah, it can be about the type of work and the amount of work and so on, but it's also about what it's like to live in that business, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And then what does the person do? So the person has now taken some time off. It could be weeks or months or whatever it happens to be, but they've taken some time off and they feel better. They feel stronger. They feel refreshed. They feel ready to come back. What should that person do? 'Cause, sometimes the idea of going back into that fire, into that melting pot, no matter what has changed, might just be overwhelming and triggering.
Mm.
Do you think that person should have a plan to come back, or be brave and say, no, no, I'm going to go somewhere different? And wherever they do end up, what should they do differently day to day, week to week, to help prevent them burning out again?
Mm. So, speaking from my personal experience of having been through this, what I did differently was be quite ruthless about the people that I wanted to work with and the kind of the energy that I wanted to work within. A lot of stuff came my way during that year, that could have been interesting. Some of it was too early stage, so I knew it would be a nightmare, essentially. The right people came along eventually, and I could feel that the energy was right, and they had done startups before, so they knew that it didn't have to be a vastly stressful environment. So for me personally, I think during that year off, I just got pretty good at filtering out what I knew would turn into another burnout situation. Not everybody can do that. Some people need guidance, they need a coach, or they need a peer group, or people who can point out why it was that they burnt out, or what they should avoid, or common situations that lead to it.
And how do you get back from that low moment where you just feel useless and inadequate and unable, and all those negative things that surfaced when you were really burnt out?
Mm-hmm.
With the PTSD, some of that must linger, and you must be sitting there thinking, it doesn't matter who comes to me and says, here's another CTO role, or here's another job even, I am not good enough and I cannot go back in. How do you overcome that? How do you get back to a position of self-strength where you say, actually, that was just a circumstance, a situation, and I actually do have what it takes to succeed?
Yeah. Honestly, it's such a tricky subject. I don't think anybody's really answered that. I think all the external validation and kind of support and so on in the world can't necessarily overcome you internally feeling that you have failed, essentially, or that you will never get past something. It's got to come from inside. Sometimes therapy works, sometimes coaching works. Sometimes it is just about talking about it with other people, but it only helps. It's never going to completely fix it. Hypnosis, eye movement stuff. I know people who've tried all these kind of things to kind of rewire themselves after getting to that point and needing to just kind of get away from assuming the worst about all these situations. I think it's very, very personal. It's very personal. But you can't do it through external validation alone. It doesn't work.
I got divorced some time ago, and it was a pretty traumatic experience. And I had a bit of counselling just to help me through it. One thing that the lady said to me that really changed my mindset was, you talk about what you have been through and how you're feeling. And then she said to me, wait, the war is over. And I was like, oh yeah, actually the war is over. That was then, and now this is now. And that for me was quite a cathartic moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So, Andy, just to wrap up now, we talked a lot about burnout and PTSD, and it's a fairly crunchy, almost negative topic. It's full of bad things. It's really important, and I'm really happy that people can listen to you and find a way through it. But I do just want to pause and look at the ideal. So if an organization is aware of this, if they're set up in the best possible way so that they're getting the best out of everybody, not the most, and people are not burning out, what does that feel like? Why is that company going to be more successful than one that is constantly burning through people?